Ladies and gentlemen, talking about Representative Tom Graves' bill to defund Obamacare. It's House Joint Resolution 62. I talked with Representative Graves' office this morning about this bill and got the specific bill number on this thing, but it would defund Obamacare, stop it in its tracks. Don't let any representative fool you when you contact their office. They will tell you this won't work. It can't work. That all this spending is kind of baked into the cake. It's mandatory. That's absolutely not true. No, the federal government cannot spend a single dollar unless Congress authorizes it. So if Congress says no money for Obamacare, for implementation of Obamacare, just like the Congress has said since 1976, no money, no federal money for abortions. That's a mandatory program, part of Medicaid. And since 1976, the Congress has said we're going to fund every part of Medicaid except this part. You can't use federal taxpayer dollars to pay for abortions. So appropriations bills can be used to tame even mandatory programs. Don't let anybody fool you or lie to you on this. The other thing that the House did earlier this week, and we talked about this, been talking about this all week, they tried to come up with a proposal to add a rider to a bill so that they'd have one bill that would fund all of government, including Obamacare. Then they would attach this rider to it, an attachment to this bill that would defund Obamacare, and then they'd let the House vote on the whole package so that the House members could go out and say, hey, we voted to defund Obamacare. The problem was when that bill went over to the Senate, they could strip the way the bill was structured, and this was done intentionally by the Republicans. The Senate could strip that rider from the bill and send what was left on to President Obama. It would not have to come back to the House to have them vote to approve the changes that the Senate had made. So it was a total shell game. It was a complete fraud. It was just a trick. It was just a shenanigan, and conservatives called them on it. I mean, they really think we're too dumb to pick up on this stuff. They think they can fool us. These are our own people doing this. People that call themselves conservatives. They're the ones that are doing this to us, but conservatives called them out on it. And so they had to pull that thing back. They just shelved that thing because it's clear it wasn't going to go anywhere. So Tom Graves' bill, now this is the issue, is whether Speaker Boehner will actually bring this to the floor for a vote next week. That's going to be the issue, and that's why these calls have to go in. These calls have to go into our representatives, be a co-sponsor of Tom Graves' bill to defund Obamacare. They'll know exactly what you're talking about. Trust me, everybody on Capitol Hill will know exactly what you're talking about. I would like to leave a message with Representative X. I urge him to be a co-sponsor of Representative Graves' bill to defund Obamacare. They, trust me, will know exactly what you are talking about. Now, I think it'd be worth waiting until Monday because we want this tsunami. We want them to be just overwhelmed. We want the phone lines burned up. We want that place melting down. We want them to have to bring in extra workers to replace phone lines and replace phones because they melt in their hands. We want them to have to wear asbestos gloves on the Capitol Hill switchboard and in the offices of these representatives. And as Ted Cruz has said, this may be the last chance we have to stop this thing. This may be it. Once those goodies start rolling out the door on January 1, it may be really tough to call this thing back. And never forget that Congress exempted itself from this bill. The people that are going to answer your phones, the people that are going to answer your phone calls, they're exempted from this. You and I are not. All these Obamacare mandates, they land right on top of us. Congress, the people that answer the phones, have exempted themselves from Obamacare. They're not under the same mandate that you and I are. They get a subsidy that you and I could only dream of. So they've exempted them. This thing is so bad. I mean, that's the point there. This thing is so bad that congressional staff have been exempted from this thing because it's too expensive. It's unaffordable. They won't be able to hang on to their staff. They won't be able to afford health insurance. So they're saying it's too expensive for our staff, but it's not too expensive for you, the American people. So once those subsidies roll out the door, January 1, once those goodies go out the door, just try clawing them back. Try to take a lollipop out of the hand of a baby. Now, if you don't give a lollipop to the baby to begin with, then you don't have to worry about the baby squalling when you take it away. But you give a baby a lollipop and then you try to wrench it out of their chubby little fist, good luck with that. So once these lollipops roll out the door, good luck getting them back. So I want to take your phone calls on whether you'd like your congressman to support this thing, even if it means shutting down the government. Let's go to George, Jefferson County, Missouri. George, welcome to Focal Point. Thanks for calling. Thanks for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hey, thank you very much, Brian, for what you're doing. And, shut her down. Show that traitor president and his bunch of pirates who's paying their check.
So you're willing to shut the whole thing down?
Shut it down.
Now, what would you say if your congressman, you call your congressman's office and he says, well, we're going to get blamed for this. Republicans are going to get blamed if the government is shut down. What would you say to him or to his staff member?
I would say, you're going to get worse if you don't shut it down.
In other words, I mean, I guess what you could say is to the congressman is, you may wind up getting shut down if you don't vote.
We'll stand on your side, buddy.
Yeah.
We'll stand by you.
Yeah. Well, that's good, and I think it's good for them. I mean, they feel, the only consequences that they are worried about is what the Washington Post will say about them, what the networks are going to say about them, how they're going to be.
No worries.
How they're going to be perceived. But I think that's why they need to hear from us, George, is they need to know that this is a political winner for them, that if they vote to defund Obamacare, that the people that sent them to office and urged them to stand for this thing will defend them, will support them. And I think it's also good for them to hear that, look, people that voted for them the last time, if they don't vote for this thing, if they don't support this thing, if they don't co-sponsor this thing, they need to know that there's a real good, well, they may, if you made up your mind, I know people that have made up their mind, they're going to tell their congressman, look, you'll never get my vote again. If you don't vote for this bill to defund Obamacare, you will never get me to vote for you again. And I will actively work to support an opponent of yours. And that's the one thing that could overcome the fear that the Republicans have of what the Washington Post, they need to fear their constituents more than they fear the Washington Post. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, they don't. They fear the New York Times and the Washington Post and ABC a lot more than they fear their own constituents. And that's the equation that's got to change. All right, George, thanks for the call. Let's go to Paul, Wilmington, North Carolina. Paul, Wilmington, Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, thank you so much for taking my call. What you said earlier about the essential services, that's written into law. They use those tactics to try to scare people who are uninformed and uneducated. And unfortunately, there's a majority of those people who just don't understand how government works at all. So they use these smoke and mirrors. And I'm sad to say a lot of the Republicans use those same tricks. So I think it may be more out of preserving those tools for them to use. A lot of them, like Boehner and them, they use those deceptive tactics as well, as you stated earlier. So I think it's an unfortunate thing that we have such a minority of those who are willing to stand up and stop worrying about playing politics at all and doing the right thing. I know my representative is on board, but, the rest of, I think there's just not enough of them that are willing to take a stand. The government shuts down every weekend at 5 o'clock and every holiday. So
it absolutely does. Paul, and Paul's making a profound point here. Government is shut down 28.6% of the time. Do you understand that? I mean, what Paul has said is a profound thing. The government shuts down every Friday at 5 p.m. We have 2 days where the government is shut down. You can't call your congressional office on Saturday or Sunday. Nobody's going to be there to answer the phone. Why? Because the government is shut down. And somehow the sun keeps coming up, the world keeps spinning, and the government doesn't collapse around our ears. So it certainly can't happen. Well, thanks, Paul. I appreciate the call. And Paul made a good point there. It's good to remind these people, because what you're going to hear, I've heard this from representatives I've talked to. Well, I don't want the soldiers not to get paid. I don't want the senior citizens to lose their Social Security checks. Well, remind them that when the government shut down in 1995, all the soldiers got paid, all the senior citizens got their Social Security checks. That is a smoke and mirror thing. They're trying to play on your sympathies. They're trying to play on your patriotism. You got to support the military. So they think they can play on that fear. The soldiers aren't going to get paid. They did in 95. They will get paid in 2013. They'll play on your compassion about kicking grandma to the curb. The Medicare checks, they went out. The Social Security checks, they went out in 1995. It's a totally bogus fear they're trying to create in the American people. Let's go to Catherine in Wallace, North Carolina. Catherine, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind? And by the way, last caller said, look, my representative's on board. If your representative is on board, they need to hear from us too. They need to know that we support what they're doing and we're going to stand with them. Catherine, go ahead.
Well, Brian, I don't know. I've got a question about the bill for you.
Okay.
Will it both fund the government for a year and delay Obamacare for a year? Because that would give great security to the small businesses.
Yes.
And if not, it will fund the government for a year.
Yes.
Democrats ought to like that.
It will fund all the rest of government. I mean, even stuff.
But for
Catherine,
a year.
For a year, for 1 year.
Okay. And Obamacare will be delayed for a year.
Obamacare will be delayed for 1 year, and then we could do the same thing.
Democrats have small businesses, too. They ought to love that security for a year. That's the thing.
Well, and that's one of the concerns we've got is what this thing is doing to small businesses. It's killing them. It's forcing them to reduce their employees to part-time so they don't come under the Obamacare mandate. So you've got small businesses there. Employees are losing their health insurance. They're losing hours. They're losing wages. They're going to be forced into these exchanges, which they haven't had to deal with before. That's going to be a total nightmare for a lot of these folks. And you're right. A lot of these legislators, they are small business owners. They ought to jump at the chance to see all of the horrors of Obamacare delayed for a minimum of 1 year. We can do the same thing next year. Back after the news.
American Family Radio.
AFR Talk.
I'm Fred Jackson, News Director for American Family News, and we're the American Family Association.